Let me just get my remote. So, as you guys might be able to tell, I've drawn all these slides by hand, so no need for sketch notes, I guess. So what I want to talk to you guys about today is something we've been thinking about at Make Us Proud for a while, which is how can we actually really align the process that we go through with delivering our products around the way that we visualize it, around the way that we think about it, around the way that we manage it. And it's something I feel that we've never really quite got right. And it's been a real challenge for us to sort of get to this point until we kind of came to this moment, gosh, when was it, Hannah? About 3 months ago, 4 months ago? Where we sort of realized maybe there's a different way to be doing this. I wanted to talk to you guys sort of about that different approach that we think is making a difference and how it's affected our work and our process. And hopefully you guys might be able to take this away and start working with it and ideally give us some feedback and let us know how it goes. So I might have to move this. Right, let's see how we get on. Okay, so who in the audience has used either of these two products? If you can't tell from the drawing, this is obviously the Atlassian suite. And this is Trello, just for clarification. So hands up, who's used these products before? Okay, so most of you are reasonably familiar with these. Who uses alternative products that do something similar? Okay, you did it twice. That's cheating, but that's also fine. And who creates boards that look a little bit like this, where we've got some stuff that we want to be doing, we've got varying degrees of done, so we've got, design, develop here, but that might be to do, depending on how you guys approach it, and then some degree of deployment when it's actually gone out to people. So who uses boards sort of roughly similar to this, or not far away from that? Okay, so quite a few of you. Great. And, sorry, I'm going to keep these questions coming, by the way. So who tries to go through this process with their products, where you're building something, you measure the effect of that thing that you've built, and you aim to learn something from it? It's a pretty common process. So hands up again, who goes through this? Okay, so quite a few of you, there's some overlap. Obviously, we've been using this for a while. This has always been sort of the base of our product workflow. And one of our goals has always been to try and do this as quickly as possible, to build something small, to measure its effect, and to learn from it, and then keep this cycle going and get this cycle as tight as we possibly can, so that it's as small as it can be. And the reason that we do that is because this is sort of the important bit of the equation, really. It's like, how can we learn something about what we're making as quickly as possible? How can we get to this point where we're really building a huge amount of learning? And we really want to do this so that we can deliver that great experience, so that we know that what we're doing here is right. And I know this is very abstract, but you'll see where I'm going with this. So it's kind of an important point, I think, to just remind ourselves, just because something works doesn't mean it's good. It's pretty competitive in terms of the product ecosystem out there right now. And if you launch a product that sucks as your version 1, you're probably not going to retain those customers. I'm sure you're going to learn something from it, but it might not necessarily be the best way to launch that product. So we want to try and do this as quickly as possible without necessarily launching something. Quality is a huge part of getting your products right, and it really is a huge differentiator. And it's something that we try and put right at the core of the way that we think about products. So for us, it's focusing on the basics, getting them right, making them as high quality as possible, and launching with that. So to kind of catalyze that within the teams, I came up with this sentence a while ago, which is, don't waste time building something that doesn't work. Because if you start with a concept, say for example you go through a design sprint, right, and you come out the end of it and you're like, yeah, a few of our users have seen that this works. A lot of people just go ahead and build that, and they're like, this is our product, we've done this, we've tested it, we've validated it, and it's not. Like, you don't know the details of how that product's necessarily going to work as effectively as it could do. You need to keep doing that cycle, keep understanding and building, learning as you go. So this has sort of become something I keep repeating to people, and I'm repeating it to all of you guys. So the important thing to kind of take away here is that we really need to be pragmatic in our approach to the time that we use with our products. It's about optimizing our time to make the most of the learning and balancing that with the build and balancing that with the delivery of the product. It's the pragmatism around those two. So less building, more learning. And we do this, obviously, I mean, this isn't new stuff that I'm telling you guys. This is just setting the scene for what I'm about to tell you. But building small to learn quickly is really important. You know, we do things like building prototypes. We do things like building maps and then testing people as they go through them. Build things like small code prototypes, put them in front of people, see how they work, see if the workflow makes sense, mock-ups. And we write tests to understand how all of this stuff's actually making a difference. And this is great. Small builds, learning quickly. And we do this with small cross-functional teams, something that Paul just talked about, actually. So there's a really nice overlap there. Thanks, Paul. It was great to see how you guys have approached this. And for us, these small cross-functional product teams are the combination of strategy, design, engineering, all the intersections covered in between, and product management. And really the goal by making these teams smaller is to really give them the power to own that experience, right? So they have more decision, they have more input. The person who's doing the front-end development might suddenly think, I've got a great idea for how we can do a better animation here. This kind of sucks. And that person should be empowered to want to make that change within the team. So we want to give everybody here the ownership of that experience. And so that's kind of how we do it. And so we get to the point where we're able to do build, measure, learn, build, measure, learn, build, measure, learn, build, measure, learn. Now we've actually got a point where we're happy with what we've got, and we're ready to launch it. It's great. We've done quite a few cycles about getting this cycle super, super quick. Obviously in delivering the product as well, but focusing on the measuring and the learning piece too. Cool, so we've got a high-performing product team. Awesome. But something that sort of always irked us a bit was that the tools that we were using to keep track of how we were doing this process never really seemed to fit. They felt a little bit like kind of the, you know, square peg, round hole situation. And the tools almost became an afterthought for us kind of tracking the progress of our projects and the understanding that we had of what we'd built, measured, and learned. So we thought there might be a better way to do this. And I'm going to start sort of with the problem. So when we looked at this, what we're really looking at the top here is that we're looking at process, the piece of the process that you're moving through, as the way that you're determining where we are within the product. And it kind of doesn't really make any sense when we start thinking that, you know, engineers are going to be involved in the design process. When an engineer's doing parts of a workshop to come up with a way that, you know, a particular visualization should work with the rest of the team, we can't really start breaking our process up into this. It stops making sense. So we end up in situations like this where we've got all this stuff in design, but we don't really know how close we are to completing any of these. And we've got all this stuff in development, which, is it prototyping, or is this going into the actual deployment? Now, there are obviously ways to break this up, but you end up with just a larger spread of a similar problem. It doesn't really become contiguous, and it doesn't help catalyze the design process that we wanted to go through. So it was this process piece that kind of became the problem. And so measuring our progress by process didn't really seem to make sense. We thought there's got to be a better way to do this. So we thought, how about progress? You know, how far through the project do we think we are? Which is kind of what Jira does. And Jira says, okay, well, you've got a to-do column, you've got a bunch of stuff that's in progress. This is obviously from very high level, you've got your epics, right? Things that are done, and things that are actually out. But again, we still don't really have much clarity into this piece, as, you know, how close we are, how much, you know, understanding have we built here. So we thought there was got to be a different way to do this. There's got to be a better way to measure progress within this process of doing this tight cycle of building, measuring, and learning. And to kind of get here, we sort of took a bit of a step back. And it was in a couple of workshops with the team where we were just sort of talking about this concept of the pursuit of experience. And when we were doing like retrospectives, when we were doing discussions in the team about how we were getting on with a particular task that we had to do with a particular story, we started using some interesting terminology to describe that shift that we were going through in terms of the process and the progress towards the goal. It sort of came down to this point of confidence. Like, how confident are we in what we've created based on what we've measured and what we've learned? And we sort of came up with this. So based on what we've measured and learned, how confident are we in this thing that we're making? And this, it sort of catalyzed an interesting change. And it became something that we just realized we were kind of doing, or I was anyway. And it suddenly started to kind of make sense. The way that I'm sort of describing this is that confidence is the agreement in the team based on what you've measured, both qualitatively and quantitatively, around the pursuit of that particular story. So, for example, you might be doing user tests and seeing how readily people were able to go through that process, how enjoyable they found it, all the qualitative elements of the actual experience. But you might be doing metrics as well, along, how many people actually were able to complete a particular task in our process. All of these things inform your understanding of the confidence that you have in that particular process. So it became a really interesting talking point. And we started using terminology like, okay, well, how confident are we in this? Well, we've only done, a first paper prototype is just a sketch. We're pretty low confidence on this. We do a round of testing. We put 3 or 4 different paper prototypes out, and maybe that increases our confidence. And we say, okay, well, one of these worked really, really well. Maybe that means we're at medium confidence. And maybe at low confidence, we have to build a UI prototype here. Maybe we have to build something that has to be written in code. There's no other way to do it. So what we're doing is we're getting away from this idea of having any sort of form of deliverable as part of the process. And we're moving to something that's purely about the understanding that we have of where we are as designers and as a product team. So it's an interesting shift. I'm really intrigued to see what you guys think of this. So what does that look like in context? Well, if we look at our product board now, obviously these are much simpler than you would actually be using in your own teams. Obviously, this is just for illustration. But what if we had low confidence, medium confidence, and high confidence, then the opportunity to put something into production? So we're using confidence as the indicator. So we might have, the prototypes, varying degrees of prototypes, varying degrees of testing, and through agreement on confidence, we can move things through this process. And suddenly we get a view of, oh, okay, I can see now where we are with this understanding. But I think to really see this and sort of understand how it takes us back to that first bit I looked at, which is our process, we have to look at an example of this in action. So how do we go from low confidence to high confidence within a story? I'm going to make up a new product here, guys, so if you want to steal this, be my guest. We're going to make a product analytics dashboard. That's the concept that we're aiming to do here. This is just for illustration purposes, but imagine this is one of our stories, or epics, or narratives, however you want to distinguish these. It's actually not important. This is not a talk, by the way, on how to do stories, how to do agile, how to do any of the user experience research. This is just a concept on how to think about progress within your product. So I'm sure you guys are already mentally picking holes in this, and that's fine. This is just an illustration. So this is our story. Remember, we're making the analytics product. So users should be aware of potential issues before they arise, and they're empowered to fix them. So we're going to go through what happens here. So let's put it on our confidence scale. We haven't even started yet, so obviously we have no idea how we're going to solve this problem. So it's low confidence, and I'm just putting aware issues just to remind us. So now we need to go through our process. We need to build, we need to measure, and we need to learn. But how do we do this? Well, the way that I think is the simplest way to do this is you just reverse it, and you say, what do we need to learn? How can we measure that? And then what's the minimum we need to build to actually achieve that? So let's actually see this in context. So we're in low confidence. What do we want to learn? Well, what type of graphs make issues easy to spot? So as an analytics tool, there's some data in the graphs we need some people to actually get to and understand and make some decisions out of. So what type of graphs are going to actually help us get there? What do we need to measure? How effectively can users identify a set of issues within those graphs? And then what's the minimum we need to build to understand that? Well, the minimum we need to build is that we need to build a test set of static visualizations of those graphs. They don't need to work. They just need to be an understanding. Actually, AJ, this was your moment of creating this, so hope you don't mind me stealing the example, I didn't ask you. But so creating a test set of static visualizations that allow us just to test enough to see what's going to be effective for people. So we do that. Here's 4 examples of ways that we could demonstrate that data. We had a workshop, sketched this together, came out with these, very low resolution. Obviously this isn't real data, but it's just enough for us to understand what's going to work here. So that's the build phase. So again, low confidence. Now we need to measure. We take this to our testers, don't need a huge amount, and we just say, hey, can you identify the future issues within these graphs? That's measuring. And then we need to learn. And we realize these two suck, these don't work very well at all. Nobody was able to identify all of the problems there. They found it very difficult to read them. However, these two worked really well. These were great. Everybody got all the information that they needed to from them. They seemed very, very clear. Fantastic. Okay, so as a team, we come back together, we've got our learnings, and we can say, yeah, this is looking pretty good. We're pretty on the nose with those two graphs. This is great. This is building our confidence, and the team agrees to move this up to medium confidence. Great. So now we're here. What do we do from here? Well, we do the same thing again. So medium confidence. We reevaluate our learn, we reevaluate and measure. So can users identify issues and find the solution this time? Can they find the solution? So they were identifying problems, they were able to notice the problems previously, but now can they actually find the solution through this? And actually to achieve this goal, we're going to need to do a little bit more in the prototype, and you'll see that in a minute. So what can we measure? Well, how effectively can users identify a set of issues and now resolve them? It's just an extension. And so what do we need to build? Well, this time we actually need to build a working prototype workflow for common issues. So we might want to use Marvel. If we've got a UI kit, we might want to use the existing UI kit to put this together very quickly. So let's look at the build. What did we choose to do? We said, let's build a quick working prototype. We use the project UI kit. We make it just functional, so it's just enough for us to test. And what's cool about this is that we can actually start testing it in relationship to other stories, which is actually a really important piece that often gets missed when you're doing testing, is how does this work in context with everything else that we're doing. So ideally, this is built using the project UI kit and the prototype so that there's context around it. Cool. So that's our prototype. Of course, that's what we've built. Now we measure it, we do the same test again. Can you identify and resolve future issues? So there's a little extension to it this time. And we get some learnings. So this is what we found out. Turns out the flow was really clear. The users were really confident. They were able to go through the process with much confidence. But there was only 80% completion of identifying and solving the problems, which isn't great. And some of the elements were missed, which is probably why there was only an 80% completion rate. So we come back from our teams and we say, okay, this is what we've learned, let's just reevaluate our confidence. And we can say, we agree together, it's important that we see 100% completion. These were integral pieces of the product that people needed to understand, and they weren't able to identify them. Our goal is that they should be able to identify 100. We need to improve this. This needs to be better. So we stay at medium confidence. We don't go up from there. And what we do at this point is we say, okay, we need to do this again. We don't need to change what we want to learn and what we want to measure, but we just want to take that influence and improve what we have. So we build an improved working prototype. This is the build stage again. So revise the visual communication, we make a slight change to the workflow, not too complicated. Again, we measure, can you identify and resolve the future issues, same testing process. And we learn. So we realize this time, hey, the flow was really clear. Everybody got 100% completion, which is awesome. The key elements were all covered, and it was described as simple by the users. So we've got a nice balance there of the qualitative and the quantitative. So we can say, yeah, actually, this is looking pretty good. As a team, we come together and we say, hey, this is great. It's a little bit boring, but it's totally working. And so we move this up to high confidence. So what do we do at high? Okay, one more time. High confidence. What do we want to learn? Can users identify issues and find the solution? Again, exactly the same. But now we want to focus on the more qualitative elements of the experience. So how enjoyably can users identify a set of issues and resolve them? And we can actually start implementing a lot of the UI into concrete that we know is really working within that. So finally, in the build piece, we can start implementing that UI there. So in the build phase, this is what we do at high confidence. We finesse the experience, make it more enjoyable. Sorry, that's very hand-wavy, but I hope it makes sense. Of course, we measure, can you identify and resolve the future issues? And we find out that actually this is a great experience. So, what have we done? We built just what we needed to build. We used as much as we could, and we got through 3 cycles of build, measure, learn to get to the point where we had the product. And we only built exactly what we needed. Now this is very much ideal world. Sometimes things will stick in medium confidence or low confidence. You might have to try quite a few different things. But it helps you understand what's working within your product very clearly. And if we take a zoom out, we can start seeing on our confidence board, okay, these are the things that need a huge amount of work. We're really low confidence. We don't understand enough about how to solve these problems. medium confidence, high confidence, and we're actually ready to start moving this piece into production. So we get a bit more clarity on exactly where we are in terms of building understanding along with the progress of the product. So, confidence in the build. This is the sort of shift that we've been trying out, and we think it's been an interesting way to work. But I think it's probably worth just summarizing how this has kind of affected our work and the two reasons why I think this works quite well. One of them is that it visualizes progress very, very clearly. We can go from low, medium to high. Low can be, just the basic assumptions that we want to break down and build confidence in, all the way through to high, which can be that high fidelity, high resolution prototype, or very final user interface code. And I just want to flip this right back to the beginning, because it's really about how this actually informs our process, which I think is the biggest change around this. And there's this concept that goes along with this, which involves the resolution of the work that you're doing. If we want to be building something at the lowest resolution possible to save ourselves as much time as we can, building at a low resolution when we're low confidence makes sense. So we should be working on paper. We should be ready to throw things away. We should be doing stuff straight out of workshops at this point. We don't want to build anything here that doesn't work. And as we move up through the confidence levels, up to medium and up to high, we can increase the resolution of the work that we're doing to the point where we're actually at the user interface that we want that we're actually going to have in the product that's working at that point. And so we call this building at the resolution of your confidence, because there's a really nice crossover between those two pieces. So that's how we got to the point where we were able to do build, measure, learn, build, measure, learn, build, measure, learn, build, measure, learn, and get to something that's a really enjoyable experience at the end without wasting time and having some clarity on the progress that we were going through and the process as it took place. So that is delivering with confidence. So I'd really like you guys to try this out. We're really interested in your feedback to see if this works for you guys. Like any of the problems, any of the things that work really well, we'd love to hear about. You can do this now. If you've already got an in progress column, if you've got a design development column, if you've got any grading of process that doesn't necessarily fit with actual understanding, you can chop those out and you can start implementing this. Just simply start thinking about it in terms of confidence and see how you get along. So yeah, we'd love your feedback. Hannah here has actually done a huge amount of work on that. Hannah's here if you guys want to have a chat with her at the end. And yeah, she'll be able to answer way more questions, I'm sure, than I can. And obviously you can email me as well. Looking forward to the feedback. Thank you so much.